Hi, welcome to Elements in Focus. My name is Aaron Rayum, the Director of Financial Planning, and we are changing it up today. So I've got Darren Hardesty here. Darren is a certified financial planner that works in our Anderson office in Lafayette and covers a lot of the families we serve here at FEG. The topic of conversation today is going to be centered around legacy planning, and Darren heads up with Joe Clark, our FEG Trust Services Division. And so, one thing that we constantly say at FEG is things are always changing and they change quickly. And so, something that took place at the end of 2024, we want to discuss here today. And Darren, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some of the changes that took place in trust planning here in Indiana at the end of 2024. So welcome to the show, Darren, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, appreciate it, Aaron. Yes, so there were some big changes. Like Aaron said, things are always changing. We always tell our families when we start working on estate planning that don't get too comfortable. This is not something you can necessarily just check off your list. It always feels like one of those things that you get it done, you have a sense of relief, but then something in life, something in the tax code, something with the laws is bound to change at some point, and it's worth going back and looking at your plan, or if you're creating your plan, saying, hey, what made sense 5, 10 or more years ago no longer makes sense today. So last year in Indiana, we had what's called the House Bill 1209 that was signed into law effective March 11th of last year. And essentially what it says is that the rules against perpetuities have been extended in Indiana. So before the law changed, most trusts that were written in Indiana were due to essentially last about 21 years after the death of the grantor, but it could be extended up to almost 90 years if needed. What that has changed to now is it's been extended to 360 years. I don't know where they got the number. It's a lot of years in there. One thing to keep in mind, multiple states have different rules against perpetuities. But that's a term that's a very legal term that most people may not understand. What is a rule against perpetuity? It essentially was established initially to make sure that whenever assets pass from one generation to another, those rules against perpetuities were designed to make sure that those assets could not remain in trust and they had to be turned over into the name of the beneficiary down the line. So when we have those, it prevents trust in Indiana up until last year. It prevented trust in Indiana from lasting for too long. They wanted to make sure that those assets at some point went to the next generation, whether it was your children or your grandchildren. By extending it to 360 years, now trust can actually last for multiple generations, potentially 4 or 5 generations after the grantor, the creator of the trust, has passed away. And as you can see on the screen, Dynasty Trust in Indiana, Indiana is now a state that can qualify to actually draft or use Dynasty Trusts. And that is a major change. It's not going to necessarily affect a lot of families, but for certain families, it definitely will play a part. So what is a Dynasty Trust? A Dynasty Trust is an irrevocable trust, meaning it's something that, the simplest way to explain it is that once the trust is established, it cannot be changed. It's kind of set in stone, and it allows certain individuals to be able to put money into that trust during their lifetime or at death, and it allows it to stay in that trust. And the benefits of it is that it helps to avoid certain types of taxes, especially estate taxes or generation skipping transfer taxes for people who are, I would say, wealthy. And wealthy can be multiple things, but in terms of numbers, based off right now, those numbers would be if your estate is $28 million or more, which is not a very large population. A lot of people are not in that situation, but for those who are, whether it's their estate or their kids or grandkids' estates, based off of that amount of money moving from one generation to the next, taxes and estate taxes are going to be applied to multiple generations if it's not managed properly. So the Dynasty Trust is designed to make sure that if it's written properly and if the attorney does the work and actually puts the right wording into the document, It allows the money to transfer from one generation to the next, remaining in trust and avoiding those big estate taxes. Just so you know, the generation skipping transfer tax rate is a flat 40%. So if I have a $50 million estate and I put this into a dynasty trust, what it allows is that when my kids inherit that money essentially is most likely going to grow. If your kids are responsible with the money, there's a really good chance that they're not going to spend that money during their lifetime. And so that money will grow, let's say, to 75 or 100 million. When it goes to the next generation, well, that 40% tax is going to be applied upon the transfer, unless it's inside of a trust, like a dynasty trust that's specifically written to avoid some of those taxes. So we're talking major millions of dollars of tax savings by using that dynasty trust. And going back again to Indiana, we have families that we work with that have created dynasty trusts, but they couldn't establish those trusts in Indiana before last year. They had to establish them in Nevada, South Dakota, some other states that had rules against perpetuities and dynasty trust rules that were more favorable to them. This is very new to Indiana, and so for Indiana residents who are in this situation that could use them, a dynasty trust is going to be a very valuable thing for their family and for their legacy as the money transfers from one generation to the next. I've got an article that will be coming out, kind of coinciding with this video or with this series. And for Indiana residents, where we see dynasty trusts potentially being valuable is for a lot of our farmers who have large farming operations. I know for farmers who their land is much more valuable to them monetarily and emotionally than what their actual value of that land is. The actual acreage is very valuable. And when they establish estate plans, a lot of times they want to make sure that farm ground does not pass from does not have a chance to be sold at any point by any of their heirs. And before last year, without having the access to a dynasty trust or a well-written trust, they pretty much could set up rules for one generation, but they couldn't stop it from going to the next. And from being outside of the control of the trust and what the grantor's wishes were. This doesn't just apply to farmers. This applies to business owners who have large businesses that at some point, if they're sold, their estate's going to be very large. They want to make sure that their kids, their grandkids, great grandkids, several generations are taken care of, and are benefiting from these assets. So this change in the rules against perpetuity definitely has a major impact. Keep in mind too, those changes can also apply to just standard revocable living trusts. It's going to add some different things that people can kind of play out, down the line to make sure that things are written not just for their kids, but they're for multiple generations. It's not going to have necessarily the same strength as what a dynasty trust could have, but it still plays a part. So it is a major change. It's very confusing for those who don't understand these things. That's why it's really important that if you have a trust or if you're wanting to create a trust, that when you speak with your advisor or your attorney about these things, that you kind of know that this is something that is different. I've been recommending to our families that we've talked to since this change has taken place that, we need to make sure that when we get to the attorney or we go back, this is a good change to make sure that the language as far as those rules against perpetuities that's written into every trust, that's updated now for what Indiana has. Because these are things that, again, that estate plan, it's always changing. It's always needing to be updated for different reasons. And, Indiana came through with a change here that highly recommend that families talk to their attorney and start seeing how does this affect them, make sure their documents are up to date, all those things that need to be kept up in their documents.
Thank you so much for going through the Dynasty Trust and the major change that took place in March of last year. If you have questions and want to know more about those types of trusts and how you could be affected, or maybe your estate planning is affected, please reach out to FEG. Schedule your complimentary Next Steps meeting. Darren is an awesome resource to be able to answer those questions for you. You can call us at our office, 800-928-4001. You can send questions to us at talk to FEG at yourlifeafterwork.com, and we're here to help answer those questions. Thank you so much for watching Elements in Focus. Have a blessed day.